Hey there, thanks for joining me. Today I want to walk you through my process from start to finish for how I created this sweet little sunset painting in gouache. If you're just starting out with gouache and you want to get in an easy practice painting that will still look great with minimal effort and minimal thought, keep watching because I'm going to show you step by step exactly how to do it. This painting requires only a few basic supplies, but will still yield a really interesting and beautiful result. The first thing you'll need is a small sheet of watercolor paper. Anywhere from 5x7 to 8x10 will work fine. Next, you'll need a clean palette. You'll want to have some painter's tape to tape down the edges of your paper. You can omit this if you don't have it, but you won't get that nice clean border. You will need one color of gouache plus white and black. I'm using Primary Red by Winsor & Newton, which gives me this incredible magenta when it's thinned down or mixed with white. You can use any single color you want though. Blue or purple would also be really nice and would definitely give you more of an evening vibe. And of course you'll also need a clean cup of water and a paper towel. For brushes, I'll be using a 3/4 inch flat wash brush. This is for laying on the background and doing some light blending. You could also use a filbert brush. I'll also use a number 8 round brush. Both these brushes are by Princeton in their Select series, and I love them for both gouache and acrylic painting. They're pretty affordable and will last a surprisingly long time if you take care of them well. If you don't have these brushes and still want to follow along, just use whatever you have that's closest and use your judgment to make adjustments along the way. And most importantly, have fun. Even if you end up with something you think is ugly at the end, at least you'll have learned something. Alright, so if you're following along, hopefully you have all your supplies together and you're ready to paint. The first thing I'm going to do is tape down my edges. I usually just eyeball it. You can do this any way you want, as long as it's consistent and straight across each edge. I think of taping my edges as insurance against an ugly painting. If it's gonna be ugly, at least it'll look intentional and put together. I've put a bit of white here on my palette already. I'll squeeze out some red as well, and a tiny bit of black. You can also just wait till the end for the black. Starting off with the 3/4 inch flat brush, I get some water and dab it on the paper towel just to get rid of the excess. I'll grab a bit of white and a bit of the red and start mixing them. I'm adding a little water to get sort of a buttermilk consistency. And I'm going to add a little bit more white. Gouache tends to dry darker, and I want this to be pretty light since it's going to be the background. So now I'm just covering the page with the light pink. I'm not worried about the bottom part because that will be covered up anyway, but I want to make sure all of the edges are covered evenly. And I've run out of paint here because I chronically underestimate how much I need, so I'm just grabbing a bit of water with my brush and adding a bit of white to the paint. This just shows you how forgiving gouache can be, especially on watercolor paper. This worked out fine because the next step is to add a bit of white to the mix with a bit more water and lighten up the middle. Working from the middle outwards, I'm brushing over and blending in the even lighter pink mixture. This is because the sun is going to be in the middle of the painting, and I want to create a subtle glow around this area. Now I'm going to clean my brush and wait a couple minutes for the painting to dry. Now that it's dry, I'm going to get my 3/4 inch brush wet and mix up a nice medium pink. It just needs to be a bit darker than the sky. It's still far in the background, so I won't go too dark with this. I'm going to use the edge of my brush to make some rough vertical marks that resemble a tree line. To create the illusion of looking into the distance, the trees on the outside are just a bit taller because they're going to be closer. I'm going to fill the bottom part now with this color too. And now I'll grab some white and soften up this tree line. This will create the illusion of atmosphere and depth. Again, I'm starting in the middle where I think is the furthest away. I'm going to keep softening everything up here with white. I want to rough up the tree line just a bit to make it look more organic. The nice thing about using gouache on watercolor paper is that the paper holds onto the water and it really helps you blend paint that's already down. I'm grabbing a touch of white with an almost dry brush and gently blending it into the paint that's already down. I'm using these swooping feathery strokes to blend upward. This is going to give it a really nice softness. I'm happy with this, and I'm going to move on to the next step. I'll clean up my brush and let this dry for a few minutes. It doesn't have to be bone dry, but I don't want it wet. Now, with my round brush wet, I'm going to pick up some red and mix it into what's already on the palette. It's quite a thin mix. I'm going to start making vague tree-like shapes. I don't want to cover up the tree line I just painted completely, so I'm trying to keep it mostly below that. Again, I'm making it so that the trees on the outside are taller. This is going to create depth and give the illusion of sort of a clearing in the woods. And I'm just adding a tiny bit of white to my mix just to get a slightly lighter red. And I'm going to concentrate some smaller marks into the middle here. Then I'm going to make sure all my edges are covered. I feel like it's a good time now to clean my brush and paint the sun. Using the round brush, I'm going to place it here in about the middle of the top third of the painting. I think having such a strong pure white element really helps add balance and interest to the scene. This could also be the moon too, depending on what color you used. Alright, now for my favorite part. After washing my round brush again, I'll pick up some black and start making some really bold tree silhouettes in the front here. When you're painting trees, the most important thing to remember is that the branches farther away from the base will always be thinner than the ones closer to the base. You can either start thin at the top and get thicker as you move toward the bottom, or start thicker at the bottom and get thinner as you move outward. I do both. It's also important to remember that trees are natural forms. They're irregular, bumpy, and sprawling in all directions. So if you're going for natural looking trees, I find it's best to keep a loose grip and jitter your brush around just a bit. A shaky hand almost kind of helps here. You could really get lost in the details, but I would recommend trying to keep it simple. Paint a few larger trees and a couple smaller ones, and maybe some random branches and brambles coming up from the bottom if you feel like it. But it's your world. Don't be afraid to do what you think is best. Now it's time to remove the tape. This is the moment all your hard work pays off and it all comes together. By the way, just do this gently so that you don't rip your paper. And there you have it, a perfectly imperfect gouache sunset. Or is it a moonrise? What do you think? Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked this video and enjoyed following along. Let me know if you try this yourself, and if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. Alright, see you next time.